meeting of the board is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everyone to our meeting this evening, and we'll start by approving our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as presented?
No changes, but there was a updated organizational chart that was handed out to you. It's in that packet. So that's all, but no changes to the agenda.
Okay then, is there a motion please to approve the agenda?
Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thank you, Kurt. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Celeste. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. We'll start with our agenda and go to the superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, Randy. Our first report is the bond project update, so Mr. Edwards is here to do the honors.
Thank you. Good evening to the board as well as Superintendent Lang. I want to update the board about 2015 projects and a little bit about the 2021 bond. First, as it relates to our two storage barns that were approved by the board for the northern campus. One larger barn is for the high school, the smaller one for the middle school. The buildings and the sites for both of those barns have been approved by the state. For the middle school pole barn, the state wanted some clarification for the electrical plan reviewer. So we've submitted those clarifications to the state for final approval. We'll be meeting shortly with our architects and contractor to begin that project. Also on the northern site, we are looking at putting in a new parking lot. This parking lot would be located alongside Outer Drive. It will be between the softball field and the soccer practice field. The parking structure will give us about 67 additional parking spaces. We submitted a revised sketch to the city just for design review. Once the city signs off on the project, then we'll go out for an official RFP for the new parking lot with hopes of getting that project started in the fall. For the 2021 bond, we continue to meet as a team collectively every 2 weeks with our architects and our construction manager. We're nearing the end of what's called the schematic design phase. Later in tonight's agenda, we will go into more detail about the progress thus far. Last month, we proceeded with the service contract for surveying work at Central L, Haverhill, and Amberley. Most recently, we entered into a service contract for geotechnical engineering services for the same 3 schools. We received 3 bids from 3 firms. We awarded that service contract to the lowest bid, which was Trizinga Associates, in the amount of $42,400. So that's my update around the 2015 bond as well as the 2021 bond. And later for Board of Education, we'll get into greater detail about the work with 2021 bond. I'll be happy to answer any questions for the board if you have any.
I missed where you said the parking structure, the additional parking.
Yes, so that would be along Outer Drive on the northern campus, just to the east of the high school. And currently, right now, we have a softball field and a small parking lot, and then there's a green space just north of that parking structure, and then it's the practice field for the soccer. And just west of that is the actual playing surfaces. So that parking space currently right now, I think it's just a fence there, but it's an open grass area that's not being used at this time. So it'll be a convenience for particularly our spectators as well, not having to park near the doghouse. Good. All right. Thank you.
Our next update is the Excellence in Special Education Awards, and this is always a fun time of this board meeting in May. So Dr. Janine Masson-Gerhardt is here to do the honors.
Good evening. I have a helper here, a couple helpers here. Ann Gordon, who's the supervisor of ESI, and Jill Fraze, who has joined our office to help with the grant writing. So this is always the best the best time of the year for me, to give you the information about the Excellence in Special Education Awards coming from the KRESA Parent Advisory Committee. We have 2 select winners this afternoon, and I'd like to first, this is the wrong one. I'd like to first introduce you to Marna Schinkel Godby, sorry Marnie. If you want to come up here, please. Each recipient has a parent who has written something about the teacher and what makes you go above and beyond as special educators. So I'd like to read that to you. Okay. Mrs. Godby has a passion for her work. She's a dedicated teacher who continues to work through challenges and keep going. She's very creative when it comes to learning, as well as she has a great sense of humor. Marna makes opportunities for students to laugh and have fun, to create a cheerful environment for all of her students. She is kind and loving and leaves no one behind. I think Mrs. Godby is a great role model and deserves this award. And that's from Parent Kaylee. So congratulations, Marnie. We think the world of you, and so do your parents. So we have a certificate, and we have a plaque for you, and we are showering you with flowers as well. And and if you wouldn't mind just standing, when Viola comes up to you, do you mind? Do you want to put that on the ground? Okay. I think it's kind of heavy. Our second recipient is Viola Stuyvesant. And Viola, if you would mind joining us, thank you. Again, this is from your a parent, Mirren Rock. Okay, and I'd like to read to you. I'm gonna miss you. Viola has been our child's special education teacher for 4 years. Over the years, we've watched her do many things above and beyond what we would expect in order to ensure our child's success educationally, socially, and emotionally. Especially when we were on online learning that happened due to the pandemic, she has been creative in keeping her students engaged in less than ideal situation. She drove to our house to drop off materials. She communicated with us via online video meetings and phone calls. She has also filled out extensive paperwork to use for outside medical and psychological evaluations. I have no doubt that she always puts forth her best effort and genuinely cares for her students in the most compassionate way possible. When she retires, she will be dearly missed. She has made a lasting impact on the students and their families who benefit from her services. So thank you, Vi. I don't want to say the R word, but you are retiring. I am. So Vi is retiring at the end of the year. And we thank you for your help and hard work with our students. And I'm not sure if you wanted to go around and shake hands. It's been a while since we've done the real in-person way.
No, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Oh, yes. Your hands. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ron. Appreciate it.
Are you going to stay, Janine, with the group, or are you guys going to go out and have a little reception?
We're going to go out and have a reception.
Okay.
You don't mind?
We don't mind, no, we have half of our audience, but that's all right. Save a little for us after the meeting. All right, thanks. I've got two other quick things. I don't know if you happen to notice there's a poster here on this side, and you can come up after the board meeting if you want to take a look at it. But a couple weeks ago, I mentioned to you that we, the district, presented at the Carnegie Foundation our story about how we included students in the development of our values, that's still ongoing, our values our declaration statement, our values, and our definition for equity in the district. So that's the intent of this poster, to show
a little bit about the process of the three things that we were attempting to do in building this out. We started this process a little over a year ago now, in March of 2021, by identifying a group of staff members representing roughly 3 people from each building. And then early in the process, we said, hey, there's a student voice that's missing. So we brought students into the picture initially through the Student Advisory Board, and then later on, they were involved in providing feedback through surveys, serving on our district values team, coming back to Student Advisory Board, and it's a process that continues to unfold as we really hone in on these. But one of the things that was kind of neat is just capturing some of the voices from the students, and some of the quotes that came from them through the process are listed here. And then our journey continues here as we continue revisions and then hope to have a more finalized project at the beginning of next school year, or sometime during next school year. And this was done in part to say, we're celebrating our 100th year anniversary and using this as a way to launch us into the next 100 years. So this is important work. We're really proud of the work. We're glad that we were able to include our students in here. And at the bottom, it really speaks to what we have embedded in our district that has provided us a strong foundation through the surveys that we've been doing, through the transparency of getting our results back from the surveys that we conduct, rolling those out to our students, our parents, and our staff, and then communicating out those results. So we feel we've got a really strong foundation that allows us to do this work so that when we're finished, there's a good deal of credibility and transparency in how we got there. So I credit KK Owen, our tutor coach, for guiding us through this process. And we had a lot of interest in the poster. The Carnegie Foundation does an annual conference on improvement in schools, the continuous improvement process. And they have one small ballroom dedicated to posters that people have put together from around the country. So we were included in that. We were number 20, as you can see here. And this is a link, if you care to follow it, to a little bit of a longer story about how we did this process. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's another one of those things that we're happy to showcase the good things that are happening here in the district. So, if there are no questions, well, it's funny. Carnegie Foundation it's first time I've gone to one of their conferences, and there were about, I think, 1,800 people in attendance at this one, which is the largest conference that I've been to in a couple of years, just because of COVID and the restrictions that are there. But just a lot of good stuff.
Thanks for presenting it. That's great. Thank you.
And then lastly, the only thing I want to mention is I want to thank Ted Leak and Larry Massey. Ted stopped by the office the other day, and he says Larry had written this book, authored this book called This Place Called Portage, and he apparently has some extra copies of that as he's transitioning into another phase of his life, he being Larry, and he offered to donate these books to the district to pass out as we see fit. So both of the high schools will be getting several hundred copies of the book to be able to disperse to students, and I think we'll have our updated 100, the history of Portage, as well, that we're planning on giving out to our graduates at graduation. So this is a nice accompaniment to that for first come, first serve, I guess, is the way we're going to distribute that. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Let's go to Board of Education.
All right, let's get you educated on what we're doing with our elementary facilities. So Johnny said he'd be back up here, and he is to do that, and he has a wealth of support behind him.
Thank you again. We will go through a presentation related to the 2021 bond. You should have a copy of this in your packet. I want to introduce a couple of my new friends and partners and colleagues because we now spend a lot more time together. As you know, we are partnering with Tower Pinkster and Fielding International as architect firm, and then we are continuing our partnership with OAK on the construction side. We're going to talk about 3 specific areas for tonight's presentation, and I'll be introducing them momentarily as well. We'll talk about what's called the Discovery Report, or we'll give an overview of that, and that will walk you through the areas of collaboration of this project since we began this work. Then we'll give you a quick overview of the designs of Haverhill and Central Elementary. And then we'll move into what's called our construction timelines of things that will be happening over the next 6 months to 2 years, just tentatively. So joining me is Ellen Duff from Fielding International, James Seaman, also from Fielding International. You've met Mike Gallivan before from Tower Pinkster. You should all know Tom Stanek from OAK, and Doug Milburn is also from Tower Pinkster. So what I'm going to do is step aside. They're going to present the package to you, and then if you don't mind jotting down any questions you have at the very end of the presentation, we'll answer questions, okay?
Johnny, let me just add one thing. As you listen to the presentation, just be thinking also of, are there any points in this process that you feel that we have not addressed as a district through this process? And are there places from here on out where you as a board may want to get involved in the decision-making process? I really don't anticipate any, but if you recall during the last bond project, there were some issues on, it was a lot more complex. And so I know the board got involved in making some decisions about the look of the buildings from the exterior so that they fit on campuses, and then also the siting, because we had some complex site situations with where ball fields were located and that sort of thing. That's not a discussion we'll be having tonight, but it's a discussion that will likely be on a retreat agenda. So just be thinking of that. Are there any places where you say, we don't want administration making these decisions, we want you? And by doing that, though, you have to adhere to the timelines that we have set forth. Our meeting schedules don't always meet in a timely manner. So I think you'll be very impressed by the amount of work that's happened, the thoughtful nature that's gone into engaging with the community and with our staff that will allow you to say, let's get her done. So, all right.
Thank you as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me grab the clicker.
Thank you for having us here tonight. We are going to take you through these 3 parts. We're going to try to do it in 20 minutes or less here. There's a lot to cover. We've done a lot of work so far. There's still a lot of work to happen yet. But tonight we do want to take you through really some of the key findings from the discovery process. That's a really important part of our work to really understand kind of the what's unique about the district here. What are the goals? What is the vision? We'll then get into the design overview. Ellen's going to cover a lot of that content, and then Mike is going to cover the construction timeline at the end. One thing that we believe in is that really collaboration provides a multiplying effect, and that's really why our teams are working together, Tower Pinkster and Fielding International, but also that collaboration extends to you and your school community here. And so we spend a lot of time listening to teachers, to district leadership, also to your students as well. So this is an image from a workshop that we did with all of the students at Haverhill. And so we really listen to them to really understand their needs, their desires, what they are looking for in a new school. So we'll talk a little bit more about that work that we did. So far, the timeline that we've worked through so far, so it's kind of been this path that we've kind of gone through here, a little bit of a curvy path in that. But one thing I wanted to point out here is that we really started on a solid foundation. So the district U had developed an ed spec that was developed in 2019 prior to us being hired, and there was a lot of really kind of foundational work that was done in that ed spec, really kind of describing the types of learning environment that you desire as a district. And so we really used that as a foundation of our work and built off of that. So we were hired after that work was done. We then quickly, right after we were hired, we moved right into that discovery process that I mentioned. And so that entailed visits. We visited all of your schools to really understand and what's happening and looking at what the existing conditions. Even though that we are kind of designing these replacement schools, it really helped us to kind of understand what is teaching and learning like here in the district. From there, we then moved into working with your leadership team and really kind of setting the dials, understanding what's really important, what is teaching and learning going to be looking like in the future, and how can we support that through a physical environment. From there, we did some case study tours where we actually took some of the school leaders out to see some schools, out to Utah to see some schools and locally as well, just to kind of understand what are other districts doing out there. And then we got into some really kind of deep engagements around the advisory engagements, around 222 on there. That's when we also met with some parents, teacher advisory groups, and the students. And then that really formed kind of the end of our discovery process, and then we moved into schematic design, which is the phase that we're in now. And we're going to share some of those ideas. We still have a long ways to go through this process and that, and so you can kind of see where it turns into that dash line there. That is the work that's yet to be done, and we'll talk a little bit more. Mike will talk a little bit more about the kind of construction timeline and that side of it. So some of the things that I just wanted to emphasize here, all of this work is also grounded in the guiding principles, that these were really your guiding principles that the school has, or that the district has had shared with us, and that we are really focusing or grounding our work in this. And so this has been really important. Everything that we've been doing, we always kind of go back to these guiding principles here and make sure that we abide by them. So just, I'm not going to read them all, but just an example of, really creating 21st century learning centers to serve learners and staff of all ages in all areas. And so we take that and use that as part of our engagement and part of our work. It becomes really important to guide our work. And then one last slide I'm going to cover before I turn it over to Ellen here. As I mentioned before, the ed spec that was done prior to us getting involved is foundational work that the district engaged in. And one thing that was really clear in that work is this move away from a traditional kind of a double-loaded corridor classroom, that there is a desire to really explore these concepts of organizing schools around pods and also extended learning commons. And so that is something that will show you how we continue to listen to teachers and school leaders to really understand what does that mean, what should that look like to really support teaching and learning here specifically in your district. And so pods, just to give you a simple definition, is basically organizing teams in groups that share common features, like a common area or small group rooms. And so it's really a team of teachers kind of working together, so organizing classrooms into a pod. Extended learning commons is really thinking about spaces outside of the traditional classroom, extended areas that can be used where learning can spill out into other areas beyond just the classroom. So those were two concepts that were explored prior to us getting involved. And you can see on the screen there how there was a vote even of what to explore, and it was really the combination of both was really important. So you're going to hear Ellen talk about learning community, which is a term that we've been using here with district leadership to really explore this concept of pods and extended learning commons. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen.
Hello, everyone. As James was mentioning, to start off with our leadership team, we took everybody out to a site visit in Utah to visit not only some schools that we've done, but also some schools that other people have done to make sure we are learning from what people are doing right now, what's working, what's not working, what would work for this school, and how can we improve on things we've done in the past. So things like having a welcoming entry or maybe an open servery are things you'll see as we develop our plans, are things that are working and maybe some improvements from these site visits. To kick off the engagement process after meeting with the leadership, we've also been meeting with the teachers and staff from both Haverhill and Central to really understand their priorities for what learning looks not only right now, but also in the future. Yes, we can plan for how they're learning and some of the issues they're dealing with today, but what does that look like in 30 years? We really want to make sure we're catering to those needs as well. So we've met with both Haverhill and Central about 4 times to really have the engagement process and develop these plans with them. We've also met with students at Haverhill and at Central to really understand what they want. They are the occupants of these buildings most of the time, and making sure that we have spaces that are catered to them. So they were interested in things like having nature that's inside and having spaces where they can calm down and relax within the building. So as you start seeing these plans, we'll start seeing not only things that we heard from teachers and staff, but also things that we heard from students. We also met with the community, so parents and staff from Central and Haverhill came in, and while we have different design drivers that are really catered towards each building, things like a welcoming entry or a teacher workshop area that will cater in all buildings that we're building, we really wanted to figure out what the unique aspects are for each school as well. So we learned about Maisie from Central and how she's really embedded into the process and culture of Central. Or at Haverhill, we learned about how this outdoor recreation area and the tree line is really embedded in their culture. So as we're moving forward, really finding the special, unique elements for each school, while still having these similar programs to make each school similar, but also different and cater to what the school needs. So after all of these different workshops, there were some emerging themes that came up. So you'll see these as an overall idea of kind of the spaces that we're wanting to focus on. So things like a welcoming entry, student collaboration, flexibility. And while those are great from a teaching standpoint, as architects, we can start going in and say, hey, this is what design space can help facilitate in helping these areas. One thing that we always like to do moving forward is find the barriers that are currently existing in the school, and so we can take designs and remove those barriers and create new opportunities for learning. So one example that we heard was access to nature, not only from students, but also from staff. Right now, there's these great courtyards in your current buildings, but often they're underutilized. And so in the new buildings, you'll hopefully see some of these connections to nature where students can really be engaged and outside, but also having the adjacencies close to their learning spaces. Over the report, we shared with teachers and staff a lot of these opportunities, and we take them through the lens of a design pattern. So it's an idea that can be catered to each school, but it might be implemented in a different way within each school. So for instance, a small group room at Haverhill might look a little different than a small group room at Central, depending on how they're using it within that building. One of those design patterns was integrated flexibility. You'll see that in the plans as we move forward, making sure regardless of where you are in the building, it can be flexible not only over the course of the day, but also the course of years. This building is going to be up for a long time. We want to make sure 30 years from now it still works just how the building and people who are in it are operating. Another one is the learning and community that James mentioned. So combining those pods and those extended learning areas, what does that mean when they come together? So learning and community, we've been talking with teachers and staff around how teaching and learning is working, how teachers are working together, and really taking away this idea that all learning happens in 4 walls. It's actually teachers collaborating and students collaborating and having different varieties of spaces that cater to that. So to take us into the design, we showed this to the teachers to show the opportunity for influence for the design. Right now, we're at that bottom SD, what we call schematic design. We really want all of the engagement sessions to happen before this line so that we can really have everything that they want into the building as much as possible. The sooner we learn about how they're learning, the sooner we can integrate it into the design and it doesn't affect cost. And so in terms of strategies for organization, we've gone through very many different iterations of what it looks like from a site perspective, from an interior perspective, and what we landed on is this idea of what we're calling a fan model. It's a multi-level building. The teachers were very excited about having this compact, it's 2 stories, but different tiers. So part of it's 1 story, part of it's 2 story. But because everyone can be closer together. So instead of having a 1-story building where everyone is far apart, teachers can see each other more easily, students can see each other more easily. In terms of the organization of the building and the learning communities, we're breaking things up into 6 different learning communities. So there's 3 on the bottom floor and 3 on the top floor, with some of the specials on the ground floor as well. So the earlier students have quick access to things like the library and the art, music, but also having support staff on both stories. That was really important from what we heard from the teachers. We also did a staff mapping exercise to really understand how support staff and other leadership is working in the current buildings to make sure that we're having space and home bases for everyone in the new buildings. Over time, this plan has evolved and evolved as we've been talking with the different teachers and staff members. So you can see on the ground floor, we have those 3 different learning communities from February are starting to look quite different from what they are now, whether it's how the gym's located, how leadership is worked within the building. One big change that we had from the very beginning is really having support staff integrated into the core of the building. So people like special education, OT, PT, counseling are right embedded with all the learning, and so they never have to go too far. Students can come to them pretty easily, or they can go to them pretty easily as well. These are our current plans as they stand now. There will definitely be changes as we move forward, but this is what we've been sharing with your staff and leadership. This is the Haverhill ground floor plan. And you can start to see some of those design patterns embedded within it. So as soon as you come into the building, you're in this heart space that can be shared by the community. Different students can be in there, so they're learning from each other. A 5th grader can see what a 1st grader is doing. Teachers can come and collaborate together. And it becomes flexible throughout the day, so they can be used before or after school. In terms of seeing it as an axon, this is what we call an axon. It's more of a 3D version of that plan. So you can see on that north side, you have those 3 different learning communities with a bunch of different varieties of spaces. Not only do you have discrete classrooms where you could have individual instruction, you also have these small group rooms, breakout spaces, to make sure that students have different variety throughout the day. This is the upstairs of the Haverhill plan, and you can start to see not all of it is 2-story, so making sure that when people come into the building, they still feel like they have that human scale and really respecting the neighbors to the south. Here's that upper floor, and you can start to see the breakdown of the scale as well. So the back is a little higher up with a full 2-story, and then in the front would be only that 1-story to make sure it doesn't feel too large for the community. On Central, we're looking at a similar plan. So again, having similar types of design patterns within the floor plan, but because it's a different site, we want to respond a little bit different. So with this school having 600 students instead of 450, you can see it's quite larger. But one specific difference within the Central plan versus the Haverhill is how we're approaching the cafeteria. It's actually more of an open space. So it has that direct connection to the gym. So as the process continues, we're starting to see how we can refine these plans to make it really individualized while still having some commonalities between. Again, you can see that axon, so in 3D, what that's starting to look like. And then that second floor plan as well. So you can see at the core of the learning communities in the teal, that's that special engagement space where MTSS teachers, speech teachers, all the support staff have areas where they're close to the students. And again, you can see that second floor plan. Interior, and just so you can start seeing what some of these spaces are starting to look like. This would be that main heart space at Central. So when you first come in, there's a large welcoming area with a fireplace. You have an area that feels like a living room. It's an extension of your home. People feel like they're welcoming into the community. And they also have direct access to the library. So maybe after school, parents can come in and use this space, but also the librarian can have an extension of her literacy area. You also have something, what we call a gathering stair, where different groups of students can come in together and learn together. Here's one of the dining areas, and so you can see it's less of this what we call cattle call, where everyone's coming in and spending lunch. It's more of this flexible space that you can use throughout the day. This also has direct access to the gym, so for after-school curious kids have an area in the school where they can centralize. We're also looking at different versions of common areas. So this is on the second floor and has direct access to C dining, but it has these connections as well to the MTSS offices. So they can have small breakout spaces without actually being within the learning communities. But then also having commons within the learning communities. So we're still playing with where glazing goes and how access to outdoors works, but having this direct engagement area outside of the learning discrete spaces where students can go for small groups, and it might be to bring 2 different classes together, but then also having that outdoor access as well. I know that was a really quick rundown, but we're excited about it, and we hope you guys are too. And I'll pass it to Mike for the construction timelines.
All right, great. So this is kind of that timeline that James showed earlier, so we're kind of on this little loop. We're coming around that middle bottom bend, approaching schematic design. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to wrap up schematic design, get that review meeting through leadership, and then we'll send it over to OAK to put budgets together, because we really need to know where we are along the way. So schematics are really good, really big, important phase in the project. And really, when we're talking schematic design, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's kind of like if you buy a box of Legos, right? So that the outside box is all the schematic stuff. You see the pictures, you see all the pretty stuff, you know what you're getting into when you buy that box of Legos. But then when you open it up, the first, it gives you the detail list, the items list, and maybe a couple more images. That's kind of like the design development phase we're going to get to. And then when you get to the actual instructions where you go piece by piece on how you put this Lego set together, that's what we need to get over to Tom and Stanek so they can start putting construction documents together to actually get the thing built. So anybody put together Legos in here? Have you kind of been through that process before, work with your kids? It's kind of similar, man, if you think about it. So it'll be fun to get the OAK folks on involved to get that put together. So schematically, we're going to look at cool pictures and make sure we're solving design problems, right, as Ellen just pointed out. So that the concepts are all there. We understand what this building is going to be. We've got an idea how it's going to look, but not major details have been worked out yet, right? So we get to the design development phase, start to get a little bit more detailed information. We're understanding a little more about the building. We're talking about cubbies. We're talking about lockers. We're talking about ceilings. We're talking about types of flooring finish and maybe colors. So it's a little bit more involved, and it's all part of the process too. We'll get a budget check at design development as well. So each phase, we're going to check that against the money that's available for that project. And get it, we won't move forward unless we're on budget. You have a bond that's paying for this, you have a certain amount of money. So we got to make sure we spend money as it's been allocated per building. Construction document, this is that detailed information. So this is what Tom wants to see, dimensions, information. It's not as exciting, right? It's not as pretty. This actually, with the colors that are on this slide, it's kind of misleading. It looks cooler than construction documents. Typically, it's just a black and white set of blueprints. But detailed, very important information, so that's when we get a lot of this information worked out. So schematic design, design development, those phases is where we're getting all the information and the detailed information from the district, right? So the decision-making happens at schematic and DD. We get to CD, we take those decisions now, and we're going to make sure we got enough information to get it built, get it bid properly, and get good contractors on board to complete the project. So to walk through that schedule, we've set a pretty good cadence, as Johnny mentioned. Every couple of weeks, we're meeting with the leadership team. We've got agendas to talk about specific items. So we had a meeting today to go through schematic design review meeting number 4. Excellent meeting. Got another meeting that we've spun off to get later on this week. Board presentation right now, May 9th. I'm a project manager, and we are on schedule. So that's important for me to be able to say that. So that's bolded up there on line number 2. We'll move up to schematic design, page turn, kind of a summary of what we've heard, make sure our documents are pulled together. We'll do that in a couple of weeks, and then we'll go get budgeting going with OAK, and then we'll start the design development process where we'll go through some more detailed information with the leadership team. Plan is to get through design development kind of in August, and then we'll do construction documents and be ready to go out to bid near the end of the year, and Tom can talk about that. And that's where Tom comes in.
So as Mike and finish their design from the construction phase there. We'll end up going out for Central Elementary for the first one. They'll complete that this fall, as they mentioned, in August, and we'll take a little time to make sure, review documents, and then we'll actually go through the bid phase process, which takes about 3 weeks to go out to the contractors and bid the project. We'll solicit a lot of the contractors here in the Portage greater area. And then we're planning on starting the construction phase right now in the spring of 2023. And then we anticipate that it'll take approximately 20 months to do the construction on that. And what we've got is a little bit of an overlap with Haverhill. We're actually phasing that approximately 4 or 5 months behind Central Elementary for a couple different reasons. That's from a design perspective, and then it's also to try to learn some lessons, make sure that we get enough contractors, make sure, obviously there's a lot of material challenges right now, so that's why we've got that phase the way we do. So Haverhill design construction, that will complete in the spring of 2023. And then we'll go out again, do the bid phase, and then we're planning on starting the construction in the fall of 2023. And then the construction phase would be complete in the summer of 2025. So again, that's our tentative plan for right now based on where Tower Pinkster and Fielding are, and as they said, they're on schedule, so we're anticipating that this should work. So.
All right, so that was a lot of information, and we want to be respectful that we're not rushing through this to not get into greater detail. So we want to pause, give the board opportunity to ask us questions. If there are any slides or any points of this process that you want to know a little bit more about, we've asked them to hang tight to answer any questions that you have, or any reactions, or anything you want us to know thus far. Go ahead, sir.
First of all, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you. That's good information. It's good pacing. And I guess I have some questions regarding the fishing process and how, as a result, we've got a little bit of a different cafeteria layout at this place and this place, and a little bit more common area that's going to be fishing differently in one place than the other. And I assume that was the consensus of each of the schools through all this process. Are both equally as good? Are we going to build one this way and one this way, and then everybody else is going to say, oh, yeah, this one really does make more sense? How do we mesh all that?
So again, they'll have their unique design patterns. Essentially, the biggest difference between the two buildings will be size. Central L will be able to accommodate upwards to 150 more additional students than Haverhill. But the schools, in terms of an equity piece, will be the same from there. Again, the design patterns are different. So with the smaller school in Haverhill, you don't need as much of a cafeteria or commons area as you would at Central Elementary. But our goal, again, is to learn lessons. So with Central L starting before Haverhill, there could be some things we learn in the midst of Central L that we may or may not be able to incorporate, but we can catch in Haverhill's design. But ultimately, what we'll all learn is the last schools will always be the best because they'll learn from the other 4 schools. But our goal, again, is to design them at the same level of quality in both spaces, with the difference being in size.
But programmatically, they're going to achieve the same. Each building program is going to achieve the same things, even though the spaces may look slightly different.
Correct.
And maybe, Ellen, you could speak to that.
Yeah, the dining is a great example. We're planning for 3 lunch periods right now.
Come up here so the stream can pick you up.
So right now, we're planning for 3 lunch periods, so the lunch can be condensed. And so for Central, that just means a larger area, and we want to make sure it's flexible throughout the day. That was one of our main guiding principles and design drivers. So it just looks a little bit different based off that size. And similarly, the learning communities look just a little bit different because it's 4 sections for 1 grade versus 3 sections for 1 grade. So there's just a different range of spaces, but still the same types of spaces within the space.
And I can see the curiosity I had as you went through this process, and you've done it on, I assume, different places, very similar processes. Did different things rise to the top here compared to, say, in Utah?
So go back to just one floor plan, for instance. 2 of my favorite things that came across from the teacher engagement specifically was this center teal space really making sure that the support staff was at the center of the communities. That's not something we see at every school, and something we're excited to keep developing with the teachers. Another thing was teachers wanted to make sure they saw each other throughout the day. So right now, even though there's 3 different communities, there's one central core where they can still share spaces, share students throughout the process. So maybe there's a 4th grade student that actually might want to bump up to a 5th grade class one day, maybe 10 years from now. They have that direct connection, but they still have their own individual communities. So those are 2 of the big ones.
You mentioned the heart of the building, and I need to clarify, did I hear you say a fireplace? Because I'm thinking, did I hear fire?
You did hear fireplace, so.
Please talk to me about that.
Yeah, so when we went to South Clearfield, it's a school that we did in Utah, the principal there said it is a mistake if anyone does not have a fireplace in their school buildings. So currently we have them in there. This is a schematic, we'll see what that looks like later down the line, but something that's warm and inviting in that front space.
I have to work on my imagination. I'm seeing students like, whoa, yeah, so, okay.
If we go down the road, it'll be more enclosed.
Yes, yes.
You know, not what you'll see
Okay, yeah.
with fire law.
I know.
Well,
I'm watching
fireplaces
it.
aren't fireplaces anymore.
I'm watching it. I get it.
Yeah.
I just had a question. Is it safe to assume that the other schools will be patterned the same way as these 2 are? So the 650 student will look the same as Central, and the 450 will look the same as Haverhill? Or will there be also these sorts of meetings and requests, and how do you deal with the changes over time that, gee, this school may want this right now, but in 10 years, it could be something altogether different? I'm just curious.
So we will engage the staff at each school, separate and distinct of how we did it for Central and Haverhill. So we just don't want to assume that everything that we fell in love with Central and Haverhill would absolutely work. But we also want to learn those lessons early, and things that are working well at Central and Haverhill. The advantage that the other schools will have is they'll be able to actually come in and see the places and work. But essentially what they've done, because we're building on sites and not all sites are created equal, the site logistics sometimes drive some of the design patterns. But we will engage the staff at all schools, and we'll work through all the site logistics to see. One of the pieces in one of Ellen's earlier slides, we call this iteration a fan, but we were looking at a pinwheel model, which was a little different for Central, I believe. So that middle level on this particular slide 19, is a version of the learning communities that we did not go with for Central L's site. But again, this is an example of a different layout that we could have chosen, but we chose not to use it in this particular case. This iteration could, could evolve at another site for different reasons.
Well, I'm just wondering about the 2-story issue too in some neighborhoods versus others. I don't know what you're dealing with in terms of size constraints, but also what the neighborhood around it is like.
Yes, and that's one of our guiding principles. We always go back to those guiding principles during our meetings in case there's a sticky point. And so what we have looked at, particularly with the second level of the building, one of the educational points we had to help our staff, and we had to agree as well, the term 2-story comes out of really what we see at Lake Center and 12th Street. And essentially those schools are 50-50. The first floor is essentially the same number of square footage space as the second floor. Well, in these design patterns, only the learning community is essentially at the top level. So the school is more 2/3 one level, and only 1/3 of the building is accessible for students at that second level. So as we're looking at that and trying to respect our neighbors and neighborhoods, trying to come up with a design pattern that reflects our neighborhoods, but not a massive structure that sticks out like a sore thumb. Anything you want to add with that? She's an architect. I'm learning a lot of this architect stuff.
I would say too, from the future engagements, making sure we understand the unique qualities for each school is really important. That's one thing that's come out from these different sites to make sure that it really caters to the specific people within the building, but still having similar design patterns.
One of the pieces that Ellen touched upon was the ability to have our Curious Kids before and after school programming going. And in our design patterns, one of the things that we are really putting an emphasis on is making sure we can secure or lock off the learning communities before and after schools where our guests and our students don't have to roam the entire building. So in this particular slide, slide 27, this looks like Central Elementary School. That northern half of the learning communities where all that classroom space, there'll be lock-off points where the public cannot get into those spaces after hours for Curious Kids or an after-school event, where that southern area where you see the heart of the school, cafeteria / commons, and the gym, that can be public space that we can have an after-school event in and not have others wander throughout the building. So that's a design feature that we like that we'll probably incorporate in future designs of kind of securing the public from the private before and after school events.
So in that particular slide 27, where is the before and after school?
Okay. So, Randy, between what's called the music room and I don't know if that grades a classroom, but just above you is one lock-off point, and then so everything north of that would be secured. And then if you go further right by the kindergarten classrooms, another lock-off point near the gathering stair. So everything north of those two doors would be secured where no one can gain entry after school. So we're calling that private space. Public spaces would be that middle corridor of the heart of the school into the commons and into the gym area before and after school.
Plus the stairs, right? You're not gonna let them go upstairs.
Well, they could go upstairs, but at the second level is also another access point. So they could actually use the gathering stair for reading or an activity, much like a stage. But if they were to continue to go up the gathering stair, then we would have additional lock-off points where they couldn't go into the upstairs commons area.
Yeah, so on this level, they would have access to this gray space here, because you got lock-offs here, 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 so that becomes available.
Or community space there then.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be able to physically lock that off without having someone stationed.
Right.
As a trustee, I'm pretty much blown away by this. And I love the fact that you all are spending lots of time with the people in those buildings and designing this, and it shows. And I trust all that. And so as a trustee, kind of with my kind of narrow view, my big question was, will these buildings fit kind of within these neighborhoods? And what I'm hearing is yes. And John, I think what you said was so important, is like 2/3 on the first floor and then 1/3, so there isn't, my fear was that we try to take a 12th Street and put it in the Haverhill, or on the Amberley footprint, and that just wouldn't fit. But it sounds like this is a completely different thing. And then your slide where you show the landscaping and the green space, and it all kind of comes to life. And I mean, as a trustee, it's just making sure that these buildings fit on the neighborhood around it. Will think, wow, this is a good neighbor. We're good neighbors. So this is all incredibly impressive.
The footprint will be smaller than the actual school that's there now, right? Going upstairs, right? I mean, it's gotta be a third smaller, right? I mean, the footprint of class.
Right, the overall
Or
footprint.
20% smaller because of, we're probably making the rooms bigger than what we had. So, I mean, it's gotta be about 20% smaller than that.
And common space though too, that isn't there now.
Right, so maybe the footprint's not much smaller.
It is still smaller on both sides.
Right,
Yeah,
but the footprint's smaller, so we're gonna have more green space.
Exactly.
We're all done, or more parking lot, or more whatever, because the footprint of the building's gonna be smaller.
Yeah, a smaller footprint gives you more options on how to place that building on the
Sure.
existing site.
that's where we're at right now, just having a lot of discussions around how do we place this, how do we access it with drives, separating bus traffic from vehicular traffic and construction traffic. That's one of the big challenges on Central Site in particular.
No, I was just saying I'm impressed.
With the timetable, it sounds like with a, 20-month construction, that Central will probably open at the semester.
We have not detailed an exact entry point, but essentially we were looking at ideally over a break
During
the school year.
They transition.
And then that would give us the opportunity to, and this is more in Tom's area, to get moving with the demos and parking lots and things of that nature. And then Haverhill would look more like an exact fall start, based on our timeline, assuming that all goes well.
You know, sorry, assuming all goes well, you know, with the supply chain issues and all that.
Tom, you can take some.
This isn't like Ford where we park the car out in the field until we get the chips. You know, we're waiting for electricians to come in to do this, and it'll be a challenge. I think as a board, we have to be prepared, there's gonna be some hiccups. We'll be lucky to hit a 20-month, I think, but, hopefully, in a couple, a year from now, it's better.
Well, we've talked, or Tom has talked at least about either some things we can pre-purchase and store on site that might be available now that may not be available later.
Or just get ahead of it. I got steel that used to take, 30 to 45 days, and I put orders in November, and they told me it was gonna be 4 months. And I was like, holy cow, and I still don't have it. So you rely on that, and, there's those construction projects, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, like the cities that can't get certain valves, for water mains and stuff, and they have to put the whole project on hold for a year waiting because there's very selective people who make this stuff. I don't know, it's a lot of projects are just being pushed off. So, good luck, Tom.
You're absolutely right. There's, from a lease perspective, I think one of the things that we'll have to do, once the design is complete, we go out and bid that, and rather moving that single process much quicker and get things ordered immediately versus just time delivery type things. And then we'll have to go into the process of probably storing a lot of materials to get that, but you're absolutely right. Steel and some of these other components are twice the lead time what we would normally expect, or even 3 times.
And sometimes, MDOT pays the contractor for the materials, wait for the labor, but they get a big chunk for the material. They show the invoice, they get the money to incent them to pre-buy it. So we have to think a little bit about that.
Remind me of the master plan. Will we start elementary number 3 before September of 25?
So yes, we didn't go into greater detail around school free.
You won't have a lot of input on how this building will work by the time you start planning building 3 and 4.
Yes,
Okay?
I believe we're starting design for building 3 in January. Is that right?
Right, but I mean, we won't have feedback on how the new
Correct.
buildings work before 3 and 4 are
That's correct.
down the planning cycle.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, our timeline goes way too long.
Correct. That's correct.
So they're gonna be, unless somebody sees, they're gonna be really similar, right?
There'll be
That's
similar
what
components.
restrains us somehow, which, from our point of view, makes it better because everybody wants equal, okay?
Right.
And if somebody determines one's better than the other,
Right.
that would put this group or the next group that sits around this table
That's
in
right.
hot water,
That's
so.
right. So there will not be like exact replicas or prototypes at this
It won't
point.
be
Yeah.
the west and central.
Yeah, central and
Schools
north,
that are
right.
Exactly the same.
Mhm.
As close as we could build them the same.
Right.
Well, we are building.
I mean, not west, northern and central are the same.
Yeah, they are considered prototypes of each other. Yeah.
But there are some, correct me if I'm wrong, the configuration of the classroom spaces are gonna be similar. no matter what size building. So they're not so there's sections of the building that are prototypical design that create some efficiencies for us.
Correct.
But pretty recently, Lake Center was state-of-the-art, so we all that. And now, not too many years later, this doesn't seem to resemble it whatsoever.
That's correct. That is correct. And that's the reason why we're trying to incorporate as much flexibility into this project as possible. So as we visited the schools in Utah, one of the profound things we noticed was in that learning communities area, the teachers were able to hold a grade level assembly of multiple classrooms right there in the hallway. They brought a guest speaker in, so we used to kind of chuck the kids all out throughout the school, find a gym or open space in this design pattern, similar to what we saw in Utah. Teachers were able to do one assembly in the learning commons with the presenter, or we used to have one presenter repeat that same presentation 4 times in 4 different classrooms and be there for 2 hours. So there is some efficiency and some measured flexibility that we saw in the design pattern that we believe will serve us well with this. As well as that gathering stair, that's a newer concept. And you can talk about how they use it, but essentially schools use that gathering stair in many different ways to gather students and accomplish learning or projects or activities.
So they're not really like bleachers.
Correct, they're not really like bleachers. You want to share anything? She's the gathering stair. Yeah.
Sure. So it's specifically in the heart because the teachers wanted a space where different teachers and students can come together at the focal point. But we're thinking about having different scales of gathering spaces throughout the school. So in a commons and a learning community, you might have 2 or 3 groups of students coming together, whereas in the heart, you could have maybe a whole grade level come together. And in the dining area, you could even have more than that come together. So having these different scales, so there's more variety within the building.
And they're not movable.
No, they'd be stationary. Yeah, safer.
Yes.
Just one more comment about, I guess, from a construction operation, we're talking about, the building stage 21. This is something to keep in mind also that once the building is done, like for example, for Central, then that building has to come down. So there's the duration thereafter that's got to take place, taking that down, pavement, demo, and then building permanent lots to remember back in its place. So we're talking about 20 months really, that's the building itself. So each site is going to have its own logistics and challenges.
And how soon do you forget it? Johnny, which is the site where we're gonna have to keep the old building standing so we can do the swing concept?
It would definitely be Haverhill, and we're considering whether or not we should incorporate Amberley as well, depending on the plan of renovations for Morris Bridge. But definitely Haverhill will be up through the entirety of the project. Thank you all so much. Had great questions. We appreciate it. Again, I just want to thank our partners for hanging out with us tonight, and I know you'll be seeing more of them or hearing more from them in future meetings. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the great presentation. We really appreciate it, highlighting all the work that you've done. I mean, there's a lot here, and we appreciate all the work you've done. It certainly shows the power of engaging stakeholders to come up with a design that works for everybody. So I really appreciate your work. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I know you guys have some traveling to do, so we won't be offended if you walk out. I have to go back to one, I forgot one thing. I looked over there at Kelly, and it made me think. We've got 3 new doctors in the house recently. Kelly's going to send us as one, Alex McCulloch and Andy Fuhr, all received their doctorate degrees from Michigan University.
Okay.
I didn't forget anything else.
Good. We'll go to our comments communications section. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board this evening? Thanks, Brad. Any comments by board trustees this evening?
I'd like to say that it was so much fun on Thursday, just being in buildings and seeing teachers, and they were so appreciative, and having a chance to just engage with them. And I was extremely pleased that my partner in crime was Brad. So we had a chance to kind of walk around and just kind of check things out. And I'm telling you, it was very impressive. And I could tell that they truly, truly appreciated that great meal with all that good stuff from Olive Garden, and the Roman just kind of went all through the hallways. And it was very nice. So kudos to the central office.
Well, and I was going to say something very similar, but especially thank you to the Mikes. You were in Pasco for being my escort through there, and I'm somebody who's in the school building on a regular basis. You guys helped bring it alive as we did our walking tour. And I would say the same thing for Johnny, but I think Kevin out with his group. But so I got to get West and North Middle School, and what a great experience.
I guess I'll thank Mark, for inviting us to be part of this.
Yes.
It was, this was really fun to connect. I got to do Curious Kids, and a little bit of community high, and April Elementary, and then the bus garage, and maintenance. And so I have 3 different perspectives, and it was just really fun to connect with people and talk to them, and they're appreciative. I was more appreciative they let us invade their space, and all that stuff. So it was just really, everybody was so gracious. It's such a small gesture, and everybody really appreciated it, and I appreciated it more than they did. It was fun. It was fun. I wish we could do it more. So, that was just, because we really do appreciate staff. I mean, there's, I know there's always pay issues and what have you. We take what the state gives us and try to maximize value for everybody. But it's just, we have staff appreciation week. It's really, we appreciate staff every day of the year. I'm sorry, but it's Mother's Day. I think every day is Mother's Day. I appreciate my mother every day. So I think it's not that much different. And staff appreciation week is no different to some degree. We appreciate staff all the time. That was fun, Mark, and so thank you for, seriously, that was one of the probably the highlights of my year.
Especially because we don't get in the building anymore.
Yeah, it was nice to have a reason to get in the building. And Johnny, you missed my shout out to you. Thank you for the tour and the escort through North. And just the very, we went during lunch hour. That's when we were with the 6th graders, and they were pretty curious why we were there. And we had 2, I assume they were unofficial student ambassadors. As soon as we walked into the cafeteria, these girls walked right up to us, introduced themselves, and wondered why we were here and who we were. And it was just cool, fantastic.
I was just fine, I'm sorry. But were you at North Middle School?
We were at North.
Because I remember when I went to North and I had somebody assigned me 2 student ambassadors.
That's why I say, I don't think they were excited. They were just curious and they had to go for it.
And they come up and shake your hand.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was a fun time.
Good.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thought it was fun to see what their PTOs did for them too, because in both of the buildings that I was in, the PTO had done a few things for them that day, and they were enjoying that as well, so pretty cool.
It was great to be in the buildings again, because we haven't been there since before the bond. Remember, we toured all the elementaries, and the pandemic, it's been a while, so it was great to be there, and good to be included. Thank you.
It's taken 13 years, and I finally had like the best week ever as a school board trustee. It was so cool. It was great to be in the buildings and to just say thank you to people who deserve to have thank you said to them a number of times. I mean, I hope it becomes a tradition. I mean, we're all raving about it. I know there's a cost there, but I mean, Mark, you kind of figured it out, and kudos for giving us the opportunity to engage. And let's see, you and Michelle and Mike, fun hanging out with you. And then at 12th Street L, Mrs. Ablau grabbed my elbow for about 20 minutes and kind of gave me a little tour of how they do social emotional learning supports in the building. And so I got to draw a line between end statement 1.3 in the boardroom
and how they do it in elementary schools in Portage. And I was blown away at kind of seeing that line of sight. And she did a great job, and so shout out to her and the whole staff. It was a great experience.
Very good.
Just got one more comment, non-related to that. I had the pleasure of going to a track meet this afternoon. I had to cut it short to make it to this meeting, but it's great seeing kids outside because it's been such a horrible spring. And my friend of mine is in charge of Lowe's in the Midwest, and he says they are 4 weeks behind in their business. It's like their business model is 4 weeks behind its schedule because it's such a bad spring. But seeing kids out in the sunshine, Portage North, Portage Central, or in a track meet or Portage North today, it's really fun to see kids be kids. Cool. So.
Great, very good. Are there any board committee reports tonight? Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda on page 7. We only have a couple of things. One is approval of April 11th, 2022 regular business meeting minutes. And the second thing is that the Board of Education approve the Portage Northern High School Social Studies student trip to Europe from June 13 through 2023 as presented. Are there any exceptions to the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. And we can move to assurance of district performance on page 22, monitoring report 1.4. Is there a motion, please?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education accept as presented the monitoring report on 1.4 ends as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir.
So 1.4 used to be 1.3 if you were keeping score. That was changed. I think we were having that discussion, and the question was asked, will it substantially change what you report on? And the answer basically is no, it doesn't. The only thing I would mention is I think the language in that one changed from ready to be in the world of work to obtain meaningful employment. So I think that gives us some opportunities in the future to take a look at defining what meaningful employment is. We did not incorporate that into this report. It's the same information and that we provided in the past has just been updated, and you'll notice from the reports that we'll present that some of it has some gap stuff because of COVID, some gaps in the data we collect, but Mike Huber's going to just kind of quickly go over the graphs that are in your report and highlight some of the things that are more meaningful.
Yeah. Good evening, trustees. Thanks for allowing me up here to share about monitoring report 1.4. Kind of want to jump right into it. What I have for you tonight is just a look at the graphs that are in your packet there. You can go through the report, but I wanted to highlight some of the things we noticed. And ultimately, the biggest thing I want you to hear is that there's a lot inside the report that is probably related to COVID or COVID impacts. It's hard to remove those from our data set, but we're constantly looking at them to take a look at what might need to be modified. A number of these are all for students who have already graduated, so as you see the dates on some of them, you'll notice where they are. Taking a look at the first thing, data sheet 141, which is college enrollment, one of the key pieces I want you to see here is that if we just look at the 0 to 6 month data from these three classes, you'll notice that our data is 82% to 78% to 73%. So there's a little downward shift that's probably related to what's happening overall in terms of both, is college the place where I want to go? And remember, this includes a wide variety of them, as well as, am I waiting until post-pandemic? Those are questions, and I am speculating and making some assumptions on it. But overall, the trends in this information look appreciable that we would normally see throughout our time. If you go to the second chart, time to complete 24 credits, there's probably a COVID trend right away. Notice that the latest data we have is for the class of 1920 inside of this, so that's really going back 2 years. And while there's not a remarkable trend here, we can notice that there's probably an impact due to students just taking their time completing 24 credits. That could also be them moving into other pathways. So all of this information is reported by the National School Clearinghouse, which does in-state and out-of-state colleges. And that can also be schools that are, there are a number of schools that don't participate in that. So we might also be missing some data in that. If we look at remedial courses, this is one spot where overall the trend looks better. So what we want to see here are graphs that move downward. So that would be decreasing the number of students that need a remedial course. And you can see that we have done that trend-wise. We have one flat and the rest have decreased. But I also want you to notice at the top there, the overall number of students going into any college. We had about 400, 430, 20. Now it's about 395. So that may impact this number, make it look better for us. Or we could say, in a different light, holding it differently, is that they might be going into a career pathway that's different than college. They're finding success there, so the students that are attending college might not need the remedial. Some big indicators coming next around our 5-year and 4-year cohort graduation rates. These were pretty consistent. Our 5-year cohort dropout rate is continuing to decline. So remember, this is a 5-year, so it allows us to look for students who maybe need a little extra time to graduate. It's a more holistic look at where we end with students. And our graduation rate is very consistent, and our dropout rate continues to make small declines over the last 6 or 7 years. That hasn't changed over the pandemic. I think we'll see some data in there that will be remarkable, but it's kind of like one trend that we're continuing, is we are continuing to maybe potentially care for students and ensuring that they're not dropping out. If we take a look at this for the 4-year cohort, which are those students who graduated immediately after their 4 years in high school, we have a small drop in our graduation rate. We're probably looking at that through the lens of what's happened through COVID. That would be data from the 2020-2021 school year, as well as our dropout rate, though, has been consistent. Maybe a small uptick, I think between 0.94 and 0.103, you'll see that we're not talking about a change in the number of students, it's a change in the cohort size. So we still had around 6 students in both of those years. So it really is a fairly consistent number for us. When we look at our partners on the next data sheet, this is all the high schools relative to our comparators. We see that we're consistently, Portage Central is at the 3rd school up here, just looking at the 2021 4-year graduation rate. Portage Northern is 6th, but they're all hovering right at that 95% level or above. So there's still some remarkable information on here, like you might say what's going on at Huron Valley, or what happened at another school like Midland. Those numbers, it's very curious. Who knows what occurred, especially given COVID. It's probably not the best time. You can see how tight some of the other data groupings are. And once you add in the last school year of graduation, we start to see a lot more variability in the numbers here. And then wrapping this up, looking at non-collegiate and graduation rate information. Looking at the career tech ed, we were basically flat. Mr. Beelang was at a superintendent's meeting today that included some enrollment information around where we're at with career tech ed for next year. Across the county, we're seeing some increases. Those may be kind of that back to normal feeling, as well as the idea that we have a career tech ed center coming. So it's creating some interest in programs that are causing some good connections for students. So for us, the numbers have been reasonably flat. We do have the 21-22 data because those are students participating currently in it. We do notice that the license and certification went down. Most likely that's just due to those programs being either less available or taking more time to complete for students. Then lastly, on the final chart for you, 146, you'll notice right in the middle, that's my highlight, we're missing data from 2021. And then I also want you to see what happens between 1920 and 21-22 data. We go from 649 down to 394 students taking this assessment. So our numbers look better, but this assessment was not required this spring. So we noticed that that really created a bump in our data set. So we weren't accountable for that. We'd love to have more data around that, career readiness. But I imagine there's some adjustments coming to this. We saw a few things in some legislation that cleared the House and is now getting a hearing in the Senate. So it is better data. We see some more improvements there, and I'm sure some 21st century skills will come in. That was the flash
at Monitoring Report 1.4 for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding this monitoring report and any of the data in it.
Mike, I don't have any questions, just a couple comments. It's funny, like the college trends for, like you said, it trended down for Portage kids going to college, but then if you look at the college population, schools, colleges are struggling to bring kids in, so it's obviously there's something going on statewide. Less kids are going to college because, except for like maybe Grand Valley, U of M's attracting from all over the country, but these schools that attract a lot of in-state students are struggling. But it's evidence that less kids are choosing college right now. I hope it's a short-term trend, or maybe we're just producing too many degrees that aren't useful and kids are getting smart. But I mean, sometimes I know so many kids who go to college, and it might not be right for them. You know, and hopefully maybe people are stepping back and eventually they're going to go. So I don't know how much control we have over this. It's a statewide trend.
I think as a parent, though, during this whole pandemic time, you would have to really, and you personally, I have not, but you would have to really assess, am I as a parent willing to pay this huge amount when my kid is going to be sitting in their bedroom doing their work? That, to me, that would not make sense. So maybe a lot of people are saying, I think you need to do the community college thing, or I think, you know, let's look at this a little bit differently than we would in normal times. So it just seems logical that that would happen.
Right. So then the other comment I had was on the remedial stuff. You know, because we look good, everything went down, but the state average went down considerably too. So it's just kind of, we're following the trend. But I always like this remedial stuff, I just think fascinates me because, parents are putting their kids in college, right? Their kids coming home and they're getting the C in statistics. And if your kid is getting a C in statistics, there's a good chance he's a good predictor he's going to be taking a remedial class in college, or in math, or in algebra. You see the grades. I don't know if we educate people like, hey, if your son's getting C's, he's probably going to get remedial classes. I don't know what we do about that. We're teaching, right? We're doing everything they can to learn, but you just can't do it all. So to me, I don't know if you educate parents, like, a good chance your son's going to be taking remedial. Because I've had that conversation with parents before. It's like, well, your child was captain of this team. And I said, that's a great trade-off to take me to, because he, had a leadership position. He learned lifelong ways. So there's certain things that kids do, but I just look at the remedial stuff as like.
Well, I could say though, in the past, I think as a district, we've learned some things because of that. That at one time we had a couple different math tracks, and that one particular math track, I had one kid and possibly two that ended up in remedial math in college because of what we were teaching at that time, which we don't anymore. So it's a good heads up to us, like if we have a lot of kids in remedial something, what isn't happening here? So, we've used it to our advantage to reassess some situations, and hopefully we don't have too many.
To me, it's going to be fascinating what happens with CTE participation, say 5 years from now. After a number of us got to see Dave Campbell and his team give a real thorough overview last week. And right now, I think there are an awful lot of barriers to participating in a lot of the CTE programs. And I think at times maybe doesn't look like a great option. The new option that's going to be available is just going to be, wow, maybe I do want to be welding. Maybe I do want to be doing something with my hands. So I think that may be a really dramatic change.
We just hope we can get the counseling piece to go with that, to encourage more kids to take that on.
I was hoping the wow factor of, okay, this is a player. Because I don't know that right now we can quite say that.
But they have to know about it. That's what I'm saying.
Right on 984 to sprinkle, ta-da. I guess, I know.
And there's a program circulating from the Senior Awards Breakfast that was held last Thursday for outstanding seniors in the county that are involved in CTE, EFA, and early middle college. And there's 3,000 students in the county that are involved in those programs. And at this breakfast, they gave away 76 scholarships, and a third of those went to Portage High School students for the county. Pretty impressive.
One of these most important presentations of the year. I look at Keith and Terry and owner Linkage, and we set our schedule for the first half of this year. We'll have to get together probably the next month with Michelle and set our schedule for district extra, what monitoring data we included, and we may include some of this. This is some great stuff. So.
Yeah, we gotta leave the monitoring report schedule so that the article is after the monitoring report.
Yes,
so
yes.
they get current information.
Right, or have 11-month-old,
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on 1.4? Great presentation, Mike, thank you. Anything else? Okay, then all those in favor of approving the monitoring report, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The monitoring report is approved, and we'll move to our next monitoring report, 2.9, Emergency Superintendent Succession, and that's on page 37. Is there a motion, please?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education accept as presented the monitoring report 2.9. Emergency Superintendent Succession has a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you, Rusty. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Keith. Mark?
I don't have too much to say on this one, other than it's been updated with the retirement of Ron Aaron, and Johnny Edwards is now one of those that's being trained for this. He hasn't had a chance to formally go through any policy governance workshops and that, but we'll be on the lookout for something that we can begin getting him in the know on that, as if he doesn't have enough to do. So, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. And there is an updated org chart. The only two changes to that are in titles underneath the Assistant Superintendent for Operations. When Al retired, we kind of reworked those positions. So the facility manager / energy specialist is a new title, and then the custodial coordinator. So we've split maintenance duties and custodial duties as they were before, but we combined maintenance with the energy management, because that's the position that Steve occupied before. And then I will just mention, under the Director of Special Education, even though that the name of that department has changed, we haven't yet changed Janine's title. We want to make sure that we can do that and still be okay with how us having to have a Director of Special Education when it comes to filling out our reports and our funding. So the Director of Special Education oversees the department that's called Educational Supports and Intervention. So we may be changing her title down the road, but not right now. So now, any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
I don't think so. It's a good report. Okay, all those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.9, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. The monitoring report is approved, and we'll move to our next monitoring report 2.11, long-term asset planning, on page 42. Is there a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make the following motion. The Board of Education accept as presented the monitoring report on 2.11, long-term asset planning as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you, Kurt. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Not much to say on this one, except that it's been updated to reflect what we've been going through in our facility planning process. The interpretation has stayed the same. You heard a lot of more detailed information with tonight's update, but essentially this report kind of covers it to the time period where we're finishing up our 2015 bond and picking up this past year with the 2021 bond. So I think everything has come to the board that is expected to come with the reports on our on our balances in the bond project, financing, as well as any change orders over $100,000. All that has come to the board. So I don't think there have been any concerns with that. I've listed the projects that we're just finishing up until this report, and everything else should align with the work that or the reports that you've heard from construction updates so far. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Well, everybody has a favorite, policy. This is one of mine. Because if you follow this policy, and the district does, to the letter, you really make sure that the short and long-term needs of your stakeholders are met. So it's important policy, and the district is always in compliance. Anything else on this one? Okay, all those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.11, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. The monitoring report is approved. Now going to move to our discussion items, and the first one is the KRESA 22-23 general fund budget. Hi, Paula.
Good evening, students, Superintendent Beeling. Included in your board packet is the standard information given to us from KRESA each year. We were shared this information on April 29th, and I want to thank Sammy Stevens, our business manager, for attending that meeting in my absence when I left for vacation. This is a regular formality, as I mentioned before. We are required to bring this to our board for approval each year. Scott Thomas, the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services at KRESA, has included a very detailed cover memo in regards to the information that's included in their preliminary budget. And then I included just a short memo of a phrase that we add into the resolution to state that this information is based on information received from KRESA, and we recognize that there's a limited review of the budget document that provides limited oversight of the financial affairs of the organization. So this will come to you at the next meeting for approval. It's come to you every year for the last 18 years. Are there any questions?
Good job.
Okay, the next item is mine as well, and that is the Chartwell's contract renewal. Included in your packet was a cover memo explaining that this is again a formality process required by the Michigan Department of Education that we bring to the board on an annual basis our contract with Chartwell's for approval before I can sign off on the required documents. They have to go back to Michigan Department of Ed. Something unique happened in this year's renewal process, and I explained it to you in the memo in regards to the increase in inflation that is considerably skyrocketed over previous years. And we were able to negotiate and be allowed a one-time process to negotiate the increase. And instead of it typically being approximately a 2% increase, it's a 4% increase this year. We were able to obtain information from Chartwell's as to the why behind it. They had to hire additional staff, to procure related supplies and whatnot, for the food service program. And they're also dealing with pandemic-related issues on trying to get the proper items that are necessary to, feed the students. And we've had to have menu changes and et cetera. So I outlined the proposed increases that we think that we will see based on meals served for the management fee and the administration fee. I do want to point out to the board that we are very lucky that we have a food service fund that is self-sufficient. The general fund does not contribute to the food service fund on an annual basis. Some school districts do have to have that happen, but in our situation, Susan runs a very well-run program for us. So I just want to thank her. But it also covers some highlights of some things, that have been happening in the food service program over the past year. The overall approximate increase is about $2,300, which is a very small amount compared to the overall budget that the food service program sees.
Will they raise the fee next year to the kids? Is that with homework, or how will that work?
We have not been, the tool to determine what that increase needs to be has not been released yet from US Department of Ed. Rumor has it it's gonna release in June, and if we do have to have an increase, it will come to the board at that time for approval. I cannot answer that question at this time because we don't have the
That's
tool
all for
necessary.
it.
Yeah,
It has,
but
at some point, I mean, they've got to catch up, and I'm assuming kids bear some of that cost that are eating the meal by state mandate.
but we would only follow state mandated.
Thank you.
Any other
Appreciate
questions?
the highlight information. I mean, the number of meals that were served through March. I mean, we served 73,000 more breakfasts than in a typical year, and 102,000 more lunches than in a typical year.
I feel that has a lot to do with the free meal offerings that are
Oh,
going
sure,
through right now. And as of right now, that has not been included in any preliminary budgets for next year, so they're telling us to plan that everything's gonna go back to normal. But, I mean, there hasn't been a final decision.
Any other questions for Paul or comments? Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
And next two discussion items are technology related. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, it's hard to move on here to talk about Chromebooks and switches again, isn't it? Something we never do around here. You have two proposals in front of you. One is our annual Chromebook purchase. We're replacing about 20% of our fleet every year right now, which coincides to a 5-year lifespan, which for student Chromebooks is actually quite good. We are using the state contract and once again going with the HP unit. We've been very happy with that unit in the past, and surprisingly we're able to get parts for them right now when we want to repair them, which is a nice perk for that one. Like I said, that came off a state contract, so an RFP was not issued. We were going to primarily fund these Chromebooks through grant money this go around. We've got money available, we can use it, so we're going to go that route. Second one, just a couple of replacement switches for our disaster recovery site at Northern High School. We're in the process of upgrading that backup data center. This was a project we were looking to do next summer, but these switches are back in stock now. They've had lead times of over 16 months in the past, and it's because they're available and we have money available in the bond. I'm recommending we grab them now while we can. Once again, this is coming from a statewide contract through Dell, so an RFP was not required. And with any questions you may have, that's all I have to say.
I didn't have any questions specifically on that, but a year ago, all the gremlins we were chasing after to take to the middle schools, those are done?
Yes.
Is there any specific, this is the part?
It's a very long story.
Okay.
We chased everything down. We got updates both to our wireless controller and we got an unknown update to the firmware for the wireless cards inside of our Chromebooks. Somewhere in there was the answer. We just don't know for sure which one it was. So.
And that's really all the answer I want.
So.
Dan, is it a good thing to approve these tonight for you?
It's totally up to the board. It's not required. Stock for both of purchases are good right now, so I'm not worried about having to wait a couple of weeks. So.
You're the only one that gets that immediate consideration. Yeah. You're too good at what you do.
I'm trying to keep me out of the public eye. So.
I don't think there's any question.
Thank you, everybody.
We've reached the end of our agenda, so please hand in your self-assessments, your monthly report evaluations, and we are adjourned. Thank you.